Hi, my name is Kaylee. Welcome to the very first episode of Who, What, When, Where, Why. If you are the type of person that loves true crime, but every time you hear one of these stories, you just think, but why? What clicks in somebody's head to make them do all the things that they do? What makes a person do what they do? What clicks in somebody's brain? You are in luck, because in this series we're going to be talking about some of the worst serial killers and trying to pick apart their brains to figure out why they do all the horrendous things that people do. And today we're going to be talking about Albert DeSalvo. And this is one of those cases that it does not matter how desensitized you think you are to true crime, this one's going to make you feel a little bit nauseous. DeSalvo was born on September 3rd, 1931 in Chelsea, Massachusetts. His father was Frank DeSalvo and his mother was Charlotte Irene Roberts. He was raised in Boston in extreme poverty. His father was an abusive alcoholic. Albert recalls being around 5 years old when he watched his father throw his mother over the back of the couch and continued to attack her. He says that his siblings screamed at their father to stop, but instead of just being a decent human being, he decided to chase the children around the house and beat them on their backs with a piece of pipe because he was a plumber, so he used the first thing that he had available to him. Eventually, a police officer showed up, and Albert says, "It was different with my father when he had to fight a real man," and you'll figure out why that's a little bit ironic in a bit. Albert mentions one night when he was around 7, he watched his father knock his mother's teeth out. He broke all of her fingers one by one. Yeah, he was sick, and it just carried down. His father sold Albert and 2 of his sisters as slaves to a farmer for a total of $9. Albert and his siblings ran away from the farmer and sought refuge at Noddle Island. They would hide under piers with other homeless children, known as wharf rats. Albert tells a story of when a drunk man was attacked and killed by the wharf rats. He was murdered, picked apart for a bit of change, and his body was rolled into the river. Apparently this is not the first or the last time that Albert and his siblings witnessed this. Albert says that when he was 5, his father would teach him how to steal off the counters of 5 and 10-cent stores. After his father taught him how to steal from stores as a kid, he continued to shoplift. He would steal purses, break and enter, and he eventually escalated to some pretty sick and twisted motives for robbery. After being arrested for shoplifting at only 12 years old, he was sent to Lyman School for Delinquent Boys. Albert says the school teaches you how to be a criminal. It's where he learned more about how to steal and about sexual perversion. I'm not sure whose idea it was anyway. Let's put a bunch of 12, 13-year-old boys who have a criminal history into a room together and let's just see what happens. After he was paroled from Lyman, he says he began stealing erratically. He would break into homes and he would feel aroused going into the bedrooms where women slept. Luckily, most of these women weren't home while he would break in, but he said it was only a matter of time until he was strong and tough enough to go into the bedroom while the women were sleeping, make her let me do what I wanted with her. Yeah, this is a story of rape and murder. He was one of those people that you wish his parents would have never met and created something like that. Albert joined the military and eventually became a middleweight boxing champion in Europe. While he was in Germany, he met Irmgard Beck. I really hope I'm saying that name right. They moved back to Boston, got married, and had a baby girl with severe disabilities. Although Irmgard knew that Robert had a high libido, she avoided having sex with him due to fear of having another disabled child. Although every child, disabled or not, deserves to be loved and taken care of, you can't necessarily blame her for being worried about having a second severely disabled child. That's a lot for any family to take on. Luckily though, their second child was a healthy baby boy. After his children were born, he was quite a family man. He was well respected by his boss and colleagues. He worked as a handyman and factory worker. The only thing that people said negative about him was that he would brag quite a bit about being able to make a life for himself that he never had as a kid. And you know what? Fair enough. If you grow up in poverty and you can give your children a good life, you should be able to brag about it. Though he was married with children, by the time he was 29, he would force his way into women's homes to measure them, claiming to be a modeling scout, and he spent 18 months in jail for sexually oriented crimes. This is how he got the nickname the Measuring Man from the media. He would also kind of work as a sex worker, but never for money, more like pleasure. He talks about his high libido, saying that the queers loved that and paid for it too, which was alright with me since I needed the dough and there was some relief from the urge that was pushing me to sex. DeSalvo talks about having sex with other women too, saying that he did not care how pretty she was or how old she was, as long as she had breasts and a feminine body. And just remember, this is how men think the next time you're worried about losing 10 pounds, so a man will be interested. Just saying. Albert's first victim was a 55-year-old streamsis named Anna Slessers. He told his wife that he was going fishing, but instead drove to an apartment complex in Boston. He began wandering around the apartment complex until randomly knocking on Slessers' door. He told her that he was sent to do work on her apartment, and since she really did need work done in her bathroom, she let him in. Now remember that he was a factory worker and he was kind of already working as a handyman, so he looked like it. That was his work attire. So it isn't surprising that a lot of them believed that he genuinely was a handyman. But he didn't come to fix a bathroom. Albert proceeded to hit her over the head with a lead weight and put a belt around her neck. He says he tore her robe open and sexually assaulted her while she was bleeding out. He then washed up in the bathroom, ransacked her apartment. He wasn't looking for anything, but he was just angry. Yeah, that was his reason. He was angry. She was found dead by her son, Juris, when he went to pick her up for a memorial service. He took a raincoat from her apartment and dumped his clothes into the ocean. Because the home was ransacked, it first appeared like a robbery, but since a gold watch and jewelry were left behind, police called it a botched robbery. Police later found that she had been sexually assaulted and the cord of her house coat was tied around her neck in a bow. Albert's next victim was 85-year-old Mary Mullen on June 28, 1962. Albert told her he had some work to do in her apartment. Mullins believed that he was a maintenance man and let him into the apartment. When her back was turned, he strangled her from the back, saying she was talking nice. And I don't know what happened. All I know is my arm went around her neck. I didn't even squeeze her, and she just went straight down. Doesn't know what happened, but he knows he strangled her. Oopsie daisies, I guess. He said, I tried to hold her. I didn't want her to fall on the floor. She died in my arms, this woman. Autopsy reports say that Mullins died of a heart attack. DeSalvo laid her on the couch, thinking police would just assume that she died of natural causes. And they did, until he admitted to all of this. Fortunately, he did not sexually assault Mary. On June 30th, Albert selected another complex in another apartment at random. He knocked on the door of Helen Blake. Helen had requested maintenance on her apartment already, so she accepted his story. No problem, of course, because obviously you don't know your apartment maintenance man to face, so when a handyman shows up looking like a maintenance man, you let him in. Albert recalls that she was a nice lady, talking about her niece. When she turned around to show him a window that needed to be adjusted, he wrapped his arm around her neck and strangled her. He says she was a heavy-set, big-breasted woman, and she went down right away. That's what he recalled from this. The sick, twisted man. That's what he recalled from this. While she was unconscious, he undressed her and says he had intercourse with her and bit into her body. He says that he has intercourse with his victims quite often throughout this. It is not intercourse. It is straight up rape, and it's disgusting how he continuously calls it intercourse. Again, he rummaged through her apartment, her belongings, and then left. 65-year-old Helen Blake was found 2 days later with lacerations in her genital area, again with the signature bow tied around her neck with her bra. Although Blake's apartment was also ransacked, the fourth victim finally told police that these murders were not secondary to robbery, but they did in fact have a serial killer to deal with. On June 30th, 1962, the body of 68-year-old Nina Nichols was found very similarly to that of Anna Slessers. After Albert left Helen's apartment, he drove around for a few hours and then ended up pulling into another apartment complex. He pushed random buttons until Nina answered. He gave her his usual maintenance man story. Nina wasn't sure at first, but when Albert said that she could call the building supervisor as proof that he was sent to her apartment, she let him in. Albert claims he didn't want it to happen, but he just walked from room to room, and when he reached the bedroom, she looked at the window, turning away from Albert. He wrapped a belt around her neck and tried to strangle her. When the belt snapped, he choked her with her own stockings. He said he had intercourse with her and left a wine bottle in her lower regions. He once again rummaged around the apartment, not looking for anything, but he did get scared and left when a phone rang. Nina was found undressed with her legs spread open and her stockings tied in a bow around her neck. Her apartment was also ransacked, but coming off like a burglary to police, despite the fact that valuables were not stolen. I love how he says he doesn't want it to happen, but he just does it. He's disgusting. Police Commissioner Edmund McNamara, I think, called all police time off and sent out a public warning for all women to lock their doors and be wary of strangers. Police profilers had already decided that the Boston Strangler was a psychopath with a hatred for older women. On August 19th, Albert chose a random apartment building and pushed all the buzzers until someone answered. This time, it was 75-year-old Ida. She was waiting on the landing by the time he walked upstairs to her apartment. He told her that he was a maintenance man. She was also unsure at first, but she let Albert into her apartment. Once, Albert told her that if she didn't want work done, that he could just leave. Once he got into her apartment, he was standing behind her. He said his arm went around her neck, and he continued to strangle her with a pillowcase. He says, "I think I had intercourse." A lot of these murders, when he was talking about it after the fact, he keeps saying, "My arm went around her neck." It just, like it happened. As if he wasn't in control over his own body. He was really just quite a screwed up person. She was found 2 days later. Like the other victims, she was found with her legs open. Her legs were propped open on 2 chairs and a pillow was under her. Her apartment had been destroyed, but nothing was stolen. 65-year-old Jane Sullivan was murdered on August 20th. Albert noticed that she was in the middle of moving. He took advantage of the fact that she mistook him for one of the murderers, and when she went to show him something in the closet, he strangled her too and left her stockings tied around her neck. She struggled, but she could not fight him off. She was found 10 days later, face down in her bathtub with her housecoat shoved above her waist and her underwear around her ankles. Albert says he cannot remember if he raped her or not, and because she was left for 10 days in the August heat, it was impossible for police to tell. The body of 21-year-old Sophie Clark was found on December 5th, 1962. After Albert drove around for some time, he knocked on her door. He told her that he was interested in hiring her as a model and would pay her between $20 and $30 an hour. And remember, this was the 1960s, so that's between, if it were today, that's between $217 and $336, I think, an hour, which is, it's good money. You can't blame her for being excited about it and being like, oh, okay, I'll turn around for you. Sophie was very cautious of her safety and rarely dated, so she did not let him into her apartment. Instead, Albert asked her to turn around so he could see how she's built. When she did, he put his arm around her neck and strangled her. She struggled, but went down when he used his foot to take her foot out from under her. He raped her while she was unconscious, and when she started to wake up, and tried to scream, he gagged her and choked her with her own stockings. Sophie had been found by her roommate. She was nude and there was evidence of sexual assault. She also had been strangled with her own stockings. Her apartment, her record collection, and photo albums had all been gone through. For the first time, police sort of had some idea of who the Boston Strangler may just be. Semen was found at the scene of Sophie Clark's murder, which is the first murder that semen has been found at. A neighbor also mentioned to police that a man had knocked on her door several times and insisted that he was there to do maintenance on her apartment. But when she said that her husband was sleeping in the other room, he left. So she kind of had a physical description of what he looked like. 3 weeks later, Albert picked the lock of 23-year-old Patricia Bissett. She was standing there wrapped in a blanket and demanded to know who he was. First of all, she is a much better person than me because she offered him coffee. She put on a cute little Christmas album. If any man or any human picked my lock, that would be it. Knives thrown, guns blazing, I don't care. Stay out of my house. He said that there were 3 different names on the door, so he kind of just picked one of them and said, well, I'm dating her, and asked what time she would be home. And so Patricia said she'll be home in a few hours. Like I said, she gave him coffee, put on a Christmas album, and then Albert, just casual, friendly conversation, said that he could do whatever he wanted with her and nobody would hear her scream. Patricia got angry, as you would, and told him to leave. When she stood up, her back was turned to him, and he took the opportunity to strangle her. She had passed out, he took her pajamas off, raped, and strangled her. This time, Albert showed remorse for killing her. He said that she had looked at him and spoke to him like a man. Little did she know he was nowhere near a real man, as we know now. She was found in her apartment the next day. Her boss knows that she did not show up for work, and when somebody went to look for her, she was found dead in her bed, sexually assaulted. She had been strangled with her own stockings and tucked into bed. Unfortunately, Patricia was pregnant at the time of her death. On February 18th, 1963, he entered the apartment of a 29-year-old German-born woman. He attempted to strangle her, but he said that he could not bring himself to hit her. She bit his fingers, and that caused him to let go of her for a moment. He couldn't continue to kill her, so he left. Experts say that he couldn't do anything real to harm her besides, attempt to strangle her, but he couldn't do anything worse because she reminded him of his own wife. On March 9th, Albert entered the building of 69-year-old Mary Brown. He picked up a piece of pipe in the hallway and knocked on her apartment door. He told her that he was sent to paint the kitchen. She let him in and turned around. Albert took this opportunity to hit her over the head with the pipe. He put a sheet over her and just kept hitting her with the pipe, the sicko. Albert says that he kept hitting her. He says, quote, "This is terrible because her head felt like it was gone." Well, yeah. I'm sure it did. He then took a fork and stabbed her in the right breast. He left the fork stabbed into her chest. The autopsy reports that she died of strangulation, a skull fracture, and there was evidence of sexual assault. 29-year-old Beverly Sammons was murdered on May 8th, 1963. Albert had a hard time describing this murder, saying that it was shocking. He got into her apartment through the usual maintenance man story. He then used a knife to force her into the bedroom. She kept pleading with her not to rape her and get her pregnant. He promised he wouldn't, but he did force her onto the bed, tie her hands behind her back, gagged her, and blindfolded her. He said he began having intercourse with her anyway. I hate it when he says that. She repeated, "You said you wouldn't." Albert says the way that she spoke to him made him feel unclean, and no matter what he did, she didn't like it. Of course she didn't like it. Of course you were unclean. I hate him so much. Albert says that he stabbed her once and could not stop. I just kept hitting her until she stopped moving and screaming. He compared her to his wife, who also did not want to get pregnant. When she didn't show up for choir practice, she was discovered in her apartment. This murder was even more brutal than the rest. In addition to being sexually assaulted, her hands had been tied behind her back, there was a cloth stuck into her mouth, and another placed over her mouth. A nylon stocking and 2 handkerchiefs were tied around her throat. She had a total of 22 stab wounds, 4 in the throat and 18 in her right breast. 58-year-old Evelyn Corbin was murdered on September 8th, 1963. He got into her apartment with his usual maintenance man story. Corbin actually asked Albert, "How do I know you're not the Boston Strangler?" He offered to leave, which convinced her that he wasn't. Again, he forced her into the bedroom with a knife. She cried and said that she was out under doctor's orders not to, quote, do anything, but he proceeded to rape and strangle her. She was found naked on her bed with her underwear stuffed into her mouth and stockings tied in a bow around her ankle. Traces of semen were found in and around her mouth. 23-year-old Joanne Graff was killed in her apartment on November 25th. Albert reports feeling awkward about killing on this day since John F. Kennedy had just been assassinated. Right, because any day is just a good day to murder. Right. But still, he used his maintenance man story to get into his apartment. He talked about how her apartment was shabby and even the Salvation Army wouldn't take it. You grew up under a bridge. Okay? Albert used a knife to force her into the bedroom. He says he strangled Joanne and she fell on top of him on the bed. She had passed out. He says he thinks he bit one of her breasts and had intercourse with her. He remembers strangling her with one of her leotards. Joanne was found dead with her stockings tied around her neck in a bow. Her blouse was pulled open and her legs were spread. Albert remembers leaving her apartment and going home to watch TV and playing with the kids. I think this is what makes him so creepy, is that he just seems like an average family man. And then he rapes and murders 13 women. On January 4th, 1964, Albert's final and arguably one of the most gruesome murders took place. Albert forced 19-year-old Mary Sullivan into her bedroom with a knife. He tied her up and gagged her. He says she was still alive when he had intercourse with her, so of course that means she allowed him to do it to her. He then strangled her and carried her to a different bed. He masturbated all over her body, so his semen hit her face. He says he thinks he'd done something with a broomstick, but hopes he did not put it in her to hurt her insides. He says, "To me, this is a vicious thing." She was found dead in her apartment by two of her roommates. She was found sitting on her bed with her back against the headboard. She had been strangled with her stockings and sexually assaulted with a broom handle. Just to add to the absurdity of the case, a Happy New Year's card was wedged between her feet. DNA evidence confirms he killed his last victim, but many speculate that some of the murders were not committed by just one person. By January 17th, 1964, the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in Massachusetts, Attorney General Edward Brooke, took over the case. He began assigning other officers to the case, including Assistant Attorney General John Bottomley. Albert was arrested not for the murders, but because he had broken into a woman's apartment, threatened her with a knife, sexually assaulted her, and then left. The victim's description matched a police sketch from previous crimes. The victim picked Albert out of a lineup, and he admitted to many of the rape and some robbery convictions. When a friend told him he could get life for the rape charges, again, nobody knew that he was the Boston Strangler at this time, he said that if he got 50 lifetimes in prison, he could still not pay for what he had done. A year later, when he was held in Bridgewater State Hospital for his trial, he admitted to being the Boston Strangler. While in Bridgewater, Albert made friends with another serial killer, George Nasser. Albert and George had agreed that if one of them had admitted to the crimes, they would split the reward money that was being offered by the newspapers. Since Albert knew that he would be spending his life in prison for the rape convictions anyway, he agreed and confessed to the murders so that his family would receive some financial benefit. Albert's case attorney was F. Lee Bailey, who would go on to represent O.J. Simpson. He was also assessed by several psychiatrists. Bailey interviewed Albert to see if he really was the Boston Strangler, and not only did he know every detail of the crimes, but he also accurately described the furniture at the crime scenes. Police noticed that all the murders happened on weekends, and when asked why that was, Albert says that he could get out of the house on Saturdays by telling his wife that he needed to work. It was really creepy because he always talked about these crimes in third person, as if he was trying to remove himself from the murders. He says he didn't know why he did it and expressed remorse about his killings, especially Sophie Clark, saying that there was no reason for her death. "I'm not a man who can hurt anyone," he says. I can't do it. I'm very emotional. I break up at the least thing. I can't hurt anyone, and here I am doing the things I did. Thank God they had no loved ones, no children, all single women. I can be very thankful for that. Sure. Albert had planned to convince the jury that he was insane and spend his life in prison, and then his lawyer, Bailey, could write a book about the case and provide some money for his family. I mean, he definitely wasn't all there, but I don't think he could have got not guilty by reason of insanity case. I don't think he was that far gone. However, since there was no real evidence besides his confession, he was never charged with the murders. In January of 1967, Albert was charged with sexual assault, burglary, and robbery from an unrelated case and incarcerated at Walpole State Prison in Massachusetts. All of the 13 women he had killed were strangled to death, so many still only attribute 11 of the murders to the Boston Strangler. And some people still believe the murders on a sociopath known as a phantom fiend in the media. Albert was killed in prison on November 23rd, 1973, where he was serving life for, like I said, the sexual assault charges. Before he was killed, he told his doctor that he needed to see him urgently about the Boston Strangler murders, but he was killed the night before he was supposed to see the doctor, so nobody really knows what he wanted to talk to him about. Because it was a high-security prison, there are speculations that DeSalvo's death was a result of a collaboration between the prisoners and staff. Not saying that prison staff should help prisoners kill other prisoners, but some people may just be better off not being here. Although there were no more murders fitting the Boston Strangler case, whether or not it was DeSalvo was never really confirmed, and people who knew him doubted that he was capable of committing such crimes. His family and Mary Sullivan's nephew agreed to reopen the case and find out if Albert really was the Boston Strangler. In July 2013, the DNA from the semen left on Mary Sullivan's body was a familial match to DeSalvo's nephew. DeSilva's body was resumed and the DNA matched. Massachusetts Attorney General says there is little doubt that Albert committed the crimes. When he was 13 and still serving time at the Lyman Reform School, a psychiatrist determined that he had an IQ of 93 and said that he needed adequate social supervision. And the first time that he was arrested for rape, remember he served 18 months before this, he was told that he has psychopathic tendencies. One psychiatrist suggested that the Boston Strangler was a psychotic person suffering from schizophrenia and was looking for a phallic symbol by ransacking the apartments. And by phallic symbol, they mean sexual symbol. In Bridgewater, a psychiatrist that interviewed Albert said that he suffered from psychopathic personality disorder, marked by sexual deviation with prominent schizoid features and depressive trends. So essentially what that means is he doesn't really have the empathy to decide that he shouldn't do things because other people will be in pain. He uses sex and sexual acts as a way to give himself a little bit of a dopamine hit, but he takes it way too far because of the psychopathic tendencies. And by schizoid features, usually that means he is disconnected from reality. So that is the story of this insanely screwed up man, Albert DeSalvo. This was a tough one to listen to, but thank you for watching. Bye!